You're listening to the Alpha's love stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. Chapter 1: The empty howl the night of my 6th birthday is not a memory, it's a ghost. A ghost that lives in my bones, that whispers in the silence. I can still feel the crisp air of the ceremonial clearing, see the torches casting long, dancing shadows. The other children my age were vibrating with excitement, their tiny bodies buzzing with the promise of the shift, of meeting their wolf for the very first time. I stood between my mother's sister, Aunt Clara, and my father, Alpha Kalen of the Frostfang pack. His hand was heavy on my small shoulder, a weight I mistook for pride. One by one the children transformed. Yips of joy, triumphant howls, the beautiful, chaotic tumbling of fur and youthful energy filled the night. My best friend Leo became a sleek brown cub nipping playfully at his mother's tail. I held my breath, waiting for the familiar heat, the pull in my chest, the anything that the elders had described. I closed my eyes and begged, please, please let me be like them. The silence inside me was deafening. The last child shifted, the cheering died down, all eyes turned to me, the only one still standing there, completely, utterly human. My father's hand slid from my shoulder as if my skin had burned him. The warmth of his touch was gone, replaced by the icy chill of the mountain night. He looked down at me, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, they weren't just disappointed, they were hollow, as if the daughter he knew had vanished and a stranger stood in her place. Ilara, he said, and my name sounded like a curse on his lips. There is no wolf in you. I started to tremble. Papa, maybe she's shy, maybe tomorrow. There is no tomorrow for this. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the stillness like a blade. You are not my daughter, you are a void, a break in the line, you are not pack. The words didn't make sense at first, they were just sounds, but then I saw it, the collective turn. The entire pack, people who had carried me on their shoulders, who had shared meals with us, who had laughed with my mother, they all turned their backs. In a slow, terrible, synchronized motion, the shunning. I'd heard of it in whispered stories, a fate for traitors, never for a child. Aunt Clara's sob broke the ritual. She rushed forward, wrapping her shawl around me, pulling me against her. Kalen, she's just a child, your child, she is nothing. My father roared, his alpha power flooding the clearing, making even the trees seem to bow. Her mother died bringing her into this world, and she arrives as this human defect. The moon has denied her. The pack law is clear. She has until dawn to leave Frostfang territory. If she is found here after sunrise, she will be treated as a rogue. A rogue, an enemy to be killed. At 6 years old, my father sentenced me to exile or death. Aunt Clara didn't argue again. She clutched me to her chest, her tears wetting my hair, and hurried me away from the clearing, away from the frozen silhouettes of my former family. In the dark sanctuary of her hut, she moved with a frantic, desperate energy. She stuffed a small backpack with bread, a water skin, a worn blanket, then she pressed a cloth bundle into my hands. There's money here, Ilara, all I have. You must go to the human town, Farrington. It's south, following the river. Keep hidden, do not stop, do not look back. She knelt before me, her strong hands gripping my tiny shoulders. Listen to me, your mother, my sister, she was the fiercest wolf, the kindest heart. She loved you more than the moon itself. This is not your fault. Being wolfless does not mean you are worthless. It means your strength is a different kind. Never, ever forget that. She kissed my forehead, a fierce, final blessing, and then she pushed me out into the absolute darkness. The door closed softly behind me. I stood alone at the edge of everything I had ever known, the backpack heavy on my shoulders, the weight of my new existence crushing my small chest. I walked until my feet bled, until the cold seeped into my soul. I drank from the river, I slept under bushes, jumping at every night sound. On the third day, a rumbling truck pulled over. A kind-faced man with tired eyes took one look at me, dirty, exhausted, alone, and silently opened the passenger door. He didn't ask questions. He drove me to the outskirts of Farrington, to a small church with a glowing stained glass window. He pressed a $20 bill into my hand. Be safe, little one, he murmured, and then he was gone. The church led to social services. My story of dead parents was accepted with pitying looks. And so began my life in the foster system, a different kind of wilderness. A world of temporary beds and shifting faces where I learned the deepest lesson of all, how to be invisible, how to need nothing, to expect even less. But Aunt Clara's words became my secret mantra, a different kind of strength. I clung to them. I worked, I studied, I survived. I built a life brick by lonely brick, an apartment, a job, a quiet, predictable existence. The wolf world was a closed book, a painful fairy tale from a past that wasn't mine. I was 24 now, wolfless, packless, alone. And I believed that story until the day the storm walked into my quiet human coffee shop and those ancient, amber eyes pinned me to the spot. The ghost of my past was about to meet the tempest of my future, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2: The Amber Storm. My life in Farrington was a carefully constructed echo. A small, clean apartment that held no memories, a desk at a modest accounting firm where numbers behaved predictably, unlike people. My coworkers were pleasant, distant. They knew me as Alara, the quiet, efficient one who never joined for drinks, who never spoke of family. I was a satellite orbiting their normal lives, never touching atmosphere. That Tuesday was all rain and gray sky, the kind of damp that seeps into your bones. My boss, Mrs. Gable, had called just as I was leaving my apartment. "Alara, be a dear. We have the Anderson account meeting this morning and the coffee here tastes like tar. Could you run to the daily grind and pick up a tray? My treat." She sent an order list longer than my arm and a digital payment. So at 8:15, I was juggling my umbrella and the cafe door, rattling off a complicated list of lattes and cappuccinos to a bored barista named Chloe. The air in the daily grind was warm, smelling of roasted beans and damp wool. Normal, human. Then the door chimed again and the world stopped. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure change, like the moment before a thunderclap. The hair on my arm stood up. A chill raced down my spine that had nothing to do with the draft. The gentle hum of conversation died, swallowed by a thick, sudden silence. He stood in the doorway, a monument of a man blotting out the rainy light. He had to be 6.5 feet tall, shoulders that strained the seams of a charcoal gray coat that screamed quiet money. His hair was the color of wet slate, messy as if he'd run his hands through it in frustration. He wasn't just handsome, he was inevitable. A force of nature in a tailored coat, but his eyes, they were the color of burning amber, golden, molten, and utterly predatory. They swept the room once, a king surveying his domain, and every human instinct in the room, though they didn't know why, told them to look down, to be still. His gaze landed on me, time stretched, thin and brittle. Those amber eyes widened just a fraction. His nostrils flared slightly, drawing in a breath. A shockwave of recognition passed between us, a silent, deafening click in the center of my being. My heart didn't just skip a beat, it stuttered and froze. Every scar, every wall I'd built over 18 years trembled. He moved toward the counter with a lethal, fluid grace. My body locked, I couldn't look away. The barista called my name twice before I heard her. "Ilara, order for Ilara." I fumbled for the cardboard carrier holding 8 precious coffees, my hands clumsy and cold. He ordered a simple black coffee. His voice was a low rumble like distant thunder on a deep night. He took his cup, then turned. Those impossible eyes found me again, pinning me to the spot. "Ilara." He said my name, he didn't ask, he knew it. It wasn't a question but a statement, a claiming. How do you know my name?" The words were a whisper, torn from a throat tight with panic. A faint, almost invisible quirk touched his lips. He nodded toward the cup carrier in my shaking hands. "It's written right there." Of course, the barista's scrawl. I felt foolish, exposed. "I'm Cashin," he said. He offered no last name, he didn't need to. The name alone was a legend, even in the fractured, distant memories I carried. Cashin Vale, Alpha of the Nightfang Pack. The most powerful werewolf in the Northern Territories. They called him the Storm Lord behind his back, and he was standing 2 feet away from me. "Nice to meet you," I stammered, the human pleasantry absurd in the wake of his presence. "You're not from here," he stated. His gaze was dissecting me, piece by fragile piece. "I've lived in Farrington for 12 years. My voice sounded small, defensive. "That's not what I meant." He took a step closer. The air around him crackled, charged with a power that made my skin ache. I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze, a terrifying act of defiance. "You're pack-born, but you carry no scent markers, no pack bond at all. It's like a silence where there should be a song." The truth was a stone in my throat. I forced it out. "I'm wolfless." I braced myself for the disgust, the contempt, the same hollow look my father had given me. I waited for the storm in his eyes to break into a hurricane of rejection. It didn't happen. Instead, his expression darkened, but the anger wasn't directed at me. It was a cold, sharp thing aimed at some invisible enemy. "Who was your pack?" The past rose up, bitter on my tongue. "Frostfang, but that was a lifetime ago. Your father is Alpha Kalen." It wasn't a question, he knew the players on the board. He cast you out. For being wolfless, I was 6. I lifted my chin, a pathetic show of pride. It's tradition. Tradition, the word was a soft snarl that vibrated in my teeth. It's cowardice, it's a failure of the most basic duty, to protect a child. The sheer, unexpected fury in his voice on my behalf stole the air from my lungs. No one had ever been angry for me, only ever at me. I have to go, I whispered, sidestepping him. The coffees were growing cold, my world was tilting. His hand shot out, not touching me but blocking my path to the door. Wait, the command was absolute but his voice softened. I would like to see you again. I stared at him. The Storm Lord wanted to see me. The thought was so ludicrous it threatened to unravel my sanity. Why? Because you are a mystery, he said, his gaze intense, searing. A quiet puzzle in a very loud world. Have dinner with me tomorrow night. Every shred of self-preservation screamed no. This man was a cataclysm. He belonged to a world that had broken me. Getting close was asking for the shattering to be complete. I can't. The refusal was weak, trembling. Why not? He pressed, and he seemed genuinely perplexed. Because you are a king and I am a ghost. I just don't, I said, firmer now, building my walls back up brick by frantic brick. He studied my face for a long, silent moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a simple, thick white card. He held it out in case the winds change. I took it without thinking. Cash and Vale, Vale Holdings, a phone number, an email, nothing about wolves or packs or storms. I won't change my mind, I said, but my fingers closed around the card, holding it like a lifeline. The ghost of a smile returned, knowing and deep. We'll see. He collected his coffee, gave me one last, lingering look that felt like a physical touch, and walked out. The door chimed softly behind him. The air rushed back into the cafe. Conversations resumed, a nervous laughter bubbling up. The world started turning again. But I stood frozen, holding 8 lukewarm coffees and a business card that burned like a brand against my palm. The storm had passed, but I was already drenched, and I knew with a terrifying certainty that nothing would ever be dry or safe or simple again. The echo of my life had just been shattered by a thunderclap named Cashin. Chapter 3, The Unseen Pull. For 3 days the card lived in my nightstand drawer. I would take it out, trace the embossed letters with my fingertip, and hear his voice. In case the winds change. My winds hadn't changed. They were howling in a chaos I hadn't felt since I was a child, lost in the dark. I went to work, I filed invoices, I ate dinner alone. I told myself he was a passing curiosity, a powerful man who'd seen a strange, broken thing and was momentarily intrigued. He'd forget I had to forget, but my body wouldn't listen. In quiet moments, a strange, pulling sensation would start deep in my chest. It was a silent, persistent tug, like a compass needle being dragged toward true north. Toward him, it was maddening. It felt like a thread, fine as spider silk but impossibly strong, connecting my core to something far away, something wild. On Friday, exhaustion weighed me down like a lead cloak. Mrs. Gable had been in a state all week since the Anderson meeting, which I'd completely botched, my mind a whirlwind of amber eyes. I'd spilled a coffee, mixed up figures, and earned her sharpest, most disappointed sighs. I just wanted my couch, my blanket, the silent hum of my apartment. I pushed through the glass doors of my office building at exactly 6 p.m. into the chilly evening air, and there he was. Cashin Vale was leaning against a sleek black car that looked like it cost more than my life. He wasn't in a suit today, but dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look less like a corporate titan and more like a wolf. Relaxed but coiled, he straightened as he saw me, and that electric charge returned, snapping in the space between us. "You're stalking me," I said, my voice flat with a fear I couldn't name, a faint smile. "I prefer conducting a strategic reconnaissance in a public venue. Your week looked long. How did you find me here?" I wrapped my arms around myself, a feeble shield. "It's a small town, Alara. You have a routine. You leave this building at 6, you walk 12 blocks west to your apartment, you stop at the same market on Fridays." He said it simply, as if observing the weather. A cold dread slithered down my spine. He'd been watching. That's deeply unsettling. "It was meant to be reassuring," he said, and he actually sounded contrite. He took a step closer. "I wanted to know you were safe, that your path was clear. Have dinner with me, just talk." The thread in my chest pulled so tight it was painful. Say no, walk away. This is how you get broken again. But I looked at him, really looked, past the impossible power, past the legend. In his eyes I saw not just command, but a profound, weary loneliness that mirrored my own. A king on a very lonely throne. One dinner, I heard myself whisper, the traitorous words leaving my lips, somewhere very public and no fancy restaurants. I don't have the clothes for that. His smile was sudden, brilliant, transforming his severe face. It was like watching the sun break through a thunderhead. There's a diner, Marv's on Cedar Street. I'm told they have pie that can solve most existential crises. Marv S. My diner, the place where I'd waitressed through community college, where the booths were cracked and the coffee was strong and no one asked questions. How could he possibly know? He saw my shock. I might have done a little more than reconnaissance, he admitted, opening the passenger door. Please. Every alarm bell was ringing, but a deeper, older part of me, the part that remembered pack and warmth and belonging, was screaming louder. I got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and him, cedarwood, cold night air, and something wild like ozone after a storm. He drove in silence for a block. Why? The question burst from me. Why would the alpha of the Nightfang pack, the Storm Lord himself, want to have dinner with a wolfless nobody from a town like Farrington? Don't. The word was a sharp crack. Don't call yourself that, you are not a nobody. I am by your world's only measure. The bitterness, old and rancid, spilled over. Wolfless equals worthless, it's the first law. My world, he said, his voice low and intense, is wrong about a great many things. And you're not wolfless, Alara. I let out a short, bitter laugh. I think I'd know. I waited, I prayed, I felt nothing. I feel her. The statement was so quiet, so certain, it stole my breath. He glanced at me, his eyes glowing faintly in the dashboard light. When I'm near you, there's an echo, a shadow where a wolf should be, not gone, sleeping, locked away so deep even you've forgotten the key. Tears, hot and sudden, pricked my eyes. Don't, I choked out. Don't give me that hope, it's the cruelest thing you could do. What if it's not hope, but truth? He pulled into Marv's nearly empty lot. What if your wolf didn't abandon you? What if she went dormant to protect a little girl from a pain that would have driven her mad? I couldn't breathe. I'd never allowed myself that thought, that my emptiness was a shield, not a sentence. You felt it too, he murmured, turning to face me. In the cafe, that pull, that recognition. My wolf knew yours the moment we saw each other. He's been restless ever since. I had felt it, a soul-deep knowing that had terrified me more than my father's rejection, because that rejection was an ending. This felt like a beginning I wasn't brave enough to face. I don't know what I felt, I lied, looking away. He didn't call me on it, he just nodded. Let's eat, no more heavy questions. Tonight, I just want to know about Alara from Farrington. Dinner was a surreal slice of normalcy in an utterly abnormal situation. He ordered a cheeseburger and a chocolate shake, mirroring my order. He asked about my job, my degree, my tiny apartment. He listened like my mundane details were the most fascinating treaty negotiations. And he talked, too. Not about pack politics, but about the weight of leading so many, the constant pressure, the isolation. He spoke of his second-in-command, a fierce woman named Selene who thought he'd lost his mind, and his trusted advisor, an older wolf named Alistair who just sighed deeply. He was funny. Dry, sharp, but funny, and kind. The realization shook me. The most feared alpha in the country was kind. As he drove me home, the thread between us hummed with a tension that was both terrifying and magnetic. He stopped outside my building. Thank you, I said, my hand on the door handle, for not treating me like I was broken. You're not broken, he said, his voice gravel rough. You're a locked door, and I have infinite patience. He reached over, his fingers just barely brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. The contact was a lightning strike. The town is having a harvest festival in the square tomorrow. Will you come with me as my guest? Cash in, please. That single word, stripped of all alpha command, laid bare, a request, a vulnerability from the Storm Lord that was more compelling than any demand. The thread pulled, my resistance, already crumbling, turned to dust. Yes, I whispered. His smile in the dark was my undoing. I'll pick you up at noon. I floated up to my apartment, the ghost of his touch still burning on my skin. That night, for the first time in 18 years, I didn't feel entirely alone. There was a presence, a faint, warm glow in the void inside me. And as I drifted to sleep, I could have sworn I heard a distant sound, a faint, sleepy sigh that wasn't my own. The lock on the door had just clicked. Chapter 4, Ghosts Among the Pumpkins. The Farrington Harvest Festival was a riot of cheerful human chaos. Tented booths lined the square, selling honey and knitted scarves. The scent of candied apples and wood smoke filled the air. Children shrieked with laughter on a small Ferris wheel. It was a world of simple, bright colors and loud, uncomplicated joy. Standing beside Cashin in the midst of it was like holding a lit candle in a hurricane. People didn't stare, not openly, but they felt him. A mother pulled her child just a little closer as we passed. A group of teens' laughter died abruptly, their eyes darting away. The crowd seemed to part for him without knowing why, creating a bubble of quiet space around us. "You're making everyone nervous," I murmured, accepting a cup of hot cider from a vendor who wouldn't meet Cashin's eyes. "I'm standing perfectly still," he said, but his lips twitched. "I can't help the weather I bring with me. Can you try to be less of a thundercloud?" I asked, only half joking. He looked down at me, his amber eyes softening. "Does it bother you, my presence?" I thought about it. The primal power rolling off him should have terrified me. It did a little, but it also felt strangely familiar, like a childhood song half remembered. "No," I admitted quietly, "it just feels big. You were raised around this energy," he said, his voice dropping. "Your father was an alpha. You were born to it, your body remembers even if your mind has tried to forget." My father. The words were a splash of ice water on the warm cider in my hands. I didn't want to think of him, not here, not now. Let's not talk about him. We didn't. For a blissful hour, we were almost normal. He won me a small, stuffed black wolf at the ring toss, the irony making us both laugh. He insisted on buying me a jar of local wildflower honey because I'd mentioned I liked tea. We shared a caramel apple, and for a moment the thread between us wasn't a pull of dread but a simple, gentle tether. I let myself pretend, then I saw him, across the square near the pumpkin display, talking to Mayor Higgins, Alpha Kalen, my father. 18 years had etched new lines into his face, salted his dark hair with gray, but his posture was still rigid, his bearing still that of a man who commanded a world. He laughed at something the mayor said, and the sound, even from a distance, was a phantom punch to my gut. The ceramic honey jar slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the cobblestones with a sharp, shattering crack, golden shards and sticky sweetness spraying across our feet. Ilara. Cashin was at my side instantly, his hand on my back. "What is it?" I couldn't speak. I could only point, a tiny, trembling gesture. Cashin followed my gaze. His entire body went still, not with fear, but with a terrifying, focused intensity. The air around us grew heavier, colder. "Who is that?" "My father," I rasped. "Alpha Kalen." As if sensing the weight of our stares, Kalen looked up. His eyes scanned the crowd, found mine, and locked. Shock wiped the smile from his face, then confusion. Then a dawning, horrified recognition. His gaze flicked to Cashin, and I saw the calculation begin, the rapid reassessment of the scene. Fear, sharp and clear, flashed in his eyes before he masked it. He excused himself from the mayor and began walking toward us. Every instinct I had, honed over a lifetime of survival, screamed at me to run, to hide, to become invisible. But my feet were rooted to the spot. I was 24 years old. I was not a scared child in the dark anymore. I was. Cashin's power spiked, a wave of pure, protective dominance so potent it made several people nearby stumble, clutching their chests without knowing why. "Do you want to leave?" His voice was a low, deadly growl meant only for me. I looked at the man approaching, the ghost of my past, the source of every wound. I looked at the fierce, silent storm standing beside me, and something hard and cold settled in my core, a different kind of strength. "No," I said, my voice finding a steel I didn't know I possessed. "Let him come." Kalen stopped a few feet away, his eyes darting between Cashin and me, trying to piece together the impossible puzzle. "Ilara," he said, my name awkward, foreign on his tongue. "You've grown." "What are you doing here?" The words came out flat, lifeless. "Frostfang has business with Farrington, border agreements, resource treaties." His attention was mostly on Cashin now, wary, respectful. "I didn't know you resided here. Why would you?" The bitterness bled through. "You told me to disappear. I obeyed. You were a child, Wolfless, the law," he began, the old defense automatic. "You abandoned your child." Cashin's voice cut through Kalen's words like a shard of ice. It wasn't loud, it was absolute. "A 6-year-old girl, you threatened her life. That is not law, that is failure." Kalen's spine stiffened, his own alpha aura rising to meet the challenge. It was like a candle trying to fight a forest fire. "With all respect, Alpha Vale, this is a private family matter. She is not your family." Cashin took a half step forward, placing himself subtly between us. "You severed that bond when you cast her into the darkness. The only reason you are still standing is because she hasn't asked me to remove you." Kalen paled. He understood the threat. A direct challenge from Cashin Vale wasn't a fight, it was an execution. "Cashin," I said, touching his arm. The muscles beneath his coat were coiled steel. "Don't, he's not worth your anger." My father flinched as if I'd struck him. The satisfaction was a dark, fleeting spark in my chest. You're right, Cashin said, but his gaze never left Kalen. He's not. He addressed my father with cold finality. Your business here is concluded, Alpha Kalen. You will leave Farrington by nightfall. If you contact Alara again, by word, by messenger, by thought, I will consider it an act of aggression against Nightfang, and you know precisely what that means. Your pack, your territory, your life, the unspoken words hung in the air. Kalen's jaw worked. He wanted to protest, to reclaim some shred of dignity, but the power differential was too vast. He was an alpha facing a king. Finally, he dipped his head, the submission bitter. As you command, Alpha Vale. He looked at me one last time, and in his eyes I saw not the hollow disappointment of my memory, but a complex storm of regret, shame, and a dreadful, weary pain. Alara, I am glad you survived. Then he turned and walked away, swallowed by the cheerful, oblivious festival crowd. I watched him go, my emotions a tangled, bleeding knot. There was no victory, only a hollow echo. Are you all right? Cashin turned me gently to face him, his hands warm on my shoulders. I don't know, I whispered, a tear tracing a hot path down my cheek. Thank you for that. I meant every word, he said, his thumbs brushing my tears away. You are under my protection now. No one will harm you again. I swear this to you on my pack, on my life. You can't just declare that, I said, but the protest was weak. The part of me that had been cold for so long was desperately thirsty for the warmth of that promise. I am the Storm Lord, he said, and for the first time I heard the weight of that title not as a threat but as a vow. My word is the law in my territory, and you, Alara, are now part of my domain, but it's more than that. He took a deep breath, his gaze searching mine, vulnerable in a way that shattered me. The moment I saw you, I knew, my wolf knew, you are my fated mate. The world tilted. Mate, the word was a myth, a fairy tale for true wolves. A bond deeper than love, written in the soul itself, impossible. I can't be, I breathed. Cashin, I have no wolf, the bond requires two. You have a wolf, he insisted, his voice fierce with conviction. She's there, I can feel her like a shadow just out of sight. We will find her together, we will wake her up. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching mine. You are my other half, my balance, my Luna. Luna, the moon, the queen. The word echoed in the hollow space inside me, and for a split second something stirred. A flicker, a sigh. He didn't kiss me, he didn't need to. The connection between us in that moment was more intimate than any touch. It was a recognition, a claiming, and a promise all in one. As we stood there in the midst of the dying festival, the ghost of my father finally banished, I realized the storm wasn't over. It had just changed direction. Cashin Vale had pulled me into the eye, and I was no longer sure I wanted to be anywhere else. The locked door inside me had not just clicked, it had begun to splinter. Chapter 5, The invitation the week after the festival was a blur of whispered conversations and stolen moments. Cashin was often called away, pack emergencies, territorial disputes, the endless business of a kingdom, but he texted. He called late at night, his voice a low rumble in the dark, asking about my day, telling me about a stubborn elder wolf or a successful hunt. He was weaving himself into the fabric of my life with a gentle, relentless persistence. The thread between us was no longer a subtle pull, it was a constant, humming tension, a live wire running from my heart to a point somewhere north where he was. When he was away, a low-grade anxiety thrummed in my veins. When he was near, the world snapped into sharp, vibrant focus. One evening he picked me up after work. We didn't go to Marv's, instead he drove to a quiet overlook on the edge of town, where the lights of Farrington glittered below like fallen stars. We sat in the car, the engine off, the silence between us comfortable yet charged. Come to Nightfang, he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. He wasn't looking at me but out at the view. Just for a weekend, see the territory, meet the pack, no expectations. If you hate it, I'll bring you back. No questions, no arguments. My breath caught. The pack. The very word was a minefield of old pain. The thought of walking into a werewolf stronghold, of facing hundreds of eyes that would see only my lack, it was paralyzing. And if I don't hate it, I asked, my voice small. Then you stay, he said, turning to face me. The moonlight etched the planes of his face in silver and shadow. We figure this out together. We find your wolf. We complete the bond. You become my Luna. In truth, not just in my heart. The future he painted was so vast, so terrifyingly beautiful, it made me dizzy. That's a lot of pressure for a weekend visit, Cashin. It's not pressure, it's an invitation, a chance. He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. His touch was warm, solid, an anchor. Ilara, I can feel the bond stretching between us, getting stronger every day. It's like a melody only half heard. My wolf is restless. He needs you closer. I need you closer. I understood. I felt the same aching emptiness when he was gone, a hollow space that only his presence could fill. It was terrifying. It was everything. Okay, I whispered, the word barely audible. This weekend, I'll come. The smile that broke across his face was worth every fear. It was pure, unguarded joy. Thank you. He leaned over and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. Just give us a chance. Give yourself a chance. I called Mrs. Gable the next morning, fabricating a family emergency with a surprising ease. She granted me the days off with a sigh, reminding me of deadlines. I packed a small bag with my best clothes, which still felt hopelessly plain and human. Saturday morning, Cashin arrived at dawn. The drive north was a journey into another world. The tidy suburbs fell away, then the farmland, until we were swallowed by ancient, towering forests. The air grew sharper, cleaner, and I felt it, a shift in the energy of the world, a wild, thrumming power in the very soil. My skin prickled. Welcome to Nightfang territory, Cashin said, as we passed under a massive, natural archway of intertwined oak trees. Carved into the living wood were symbols of wolves and moons. 20 minutes later, the forest opened up, and I saw it. The Nightfang compound wasn't a rustic camp. It was a thriving, hidden village. Modern, elegant timber and glass homes were nestled among the trees, connected by winding stone paths. There was a community hall, a schoolhouse, even what looked like a small clinic. Wolves in human form went about their day, chopping wood, carrying baskets, children chasing each other. It was prosperous, peaceful, alive. This is not what I expected, I breathed. What did you expect? Cashin asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. I don't know, caves, furs, more growling, he chuckled. We're werewolves, Alara, not monsters. We evolve, we build, we protect. The pack house was a long, low lodge built of stone and dark timber, looking like it had grown from the mountain itself. As Cashin's car crunched to a stop on the gravel drive, several figures emerged from the front door to wait on the steps. My stomach clenched. Leading them was a tall, formidable woman with a severe blonde braid and piercing blue eyes. Selene, the beta. Beside her stood an older man with kind eyes and silver hair, Alistair, the advisor, and flanking them were 3 other powerful-looking wolves, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open skepticism. Ready? Cashin asked softly. No, I said honestly, but let's go. He came around and opened my door, offering his hand. I took it, my palms slick with sweat. As we approached, every gaze felt like a physical weight. Pack, Cashin's voice rang out, alpha power lending it a resonance that made the air vibrate. This is Alara, my fated mate, your future Luna. She is to be accorded every respect, every honor. Is that understood? His tone left no room for debate. The wolves on the steps all dipped their chins in submission, though Selene's eyes remained analytical, cool. Welcome to Nightfang, Alara, Alistair said, his voice warm. We are pleased to meet you. Selene stepped forward, her smile polite but not reaching her eyes. A pleasure, we've heard much. The way she said it implied what they'd heard was confusing at best. The day was a whirlwind, a tour of the Immaculate Lodge, a walk through the village where packs of eyes followed us from windows and doorways. Dinner was a formal, tense affair in the great hall with Cashin's inner circle. I felt every bite of food like a stone in my throat, hyper-aware of their silent assessment. Later, Cashin showed me to a beautiful, airy guest room with a view of the moonlit forest. They don't hate you, he said, misreading the tension in my shoulders. They're cautious, they don't know you yet. They know enough, I whispered, hugging myself. They know I'm different, they know I'm a weakness for you. He cupped my face, his touch firm, grounding. You are my greatest strength, a strength they cannot yet see. Give them time, give us time. He left me alone in the unfamiliar room. The silence here was different from my apartment's silence. It was a living quiet, filled with the sounds of the forest and the distant, comforting murmur of the pack. I changed into my nightclothes and stood by the window, and then I felt it, not the pull toward Cashin, but the stirring inside. A warmth deep in my core where there had only ever been cold emptiness. It was faint, like the first ember glowing in a banked fire, but it was there, undeniably there. I placed a hand over my stomach. Hello, I whispered to the empty room, feeling foolish. No answer came in words, but the warmth pulsed, soft and steady, a presence, a sleeping consciousness, a wild, impossible hope more terrifying than any fear burst into bloom in my chest. Cashin was right, she was there, my wolf was there. And as I climbed into the strange bed, the ember of her presence glowing within me, I knew with sudden, fierce certainty I would not fail here. I would not let them make me feel small. For her, for him. For the ghost of the girl I had been, I would find a way to belong. But as sleep finally took me, a new, chilling thought wormed its way in. If my wolf was truly waking, what had forced her to sleep so deeply in the first place? And what would happen when she finally opened her eyes? The locked door wasn't just splintering now from the other side, something had just begun to scratch. Chapter 6: The Gathering Storm. I woke to raised voices. Not a shout, but the sharp, clipped tones of an argument, carrying through the thick timber walls of the lodge. Dawn was just a gray suggestion at the window. I dressed quickly, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs, and crept into the hallway. Cashin was there, his back to me, facing Selene and Alistair. His posture was rigid, the air around him crackling with suppressed energy. Unexpected, but we must adapt, Alistair was saying, his voice calm but strained. Adapt to this, Selene's tone was ice. It's a provocation, Cashin. They're testing you, using her as the gauge. What's happening? I asked, my voice thin in the tense corridor. Cashin turned. The anger on his face softened when he saw me, but the worry in his eyes remained. Pack politics, he said, running a hand through his hair. Uninvited guests, alphas from 3 neighboring packs, arrived before dawn for an impromptu territorial council. They heard, Selene said bluntly, her blue eyes slicing to me. Word travels fast. The Storm Lord has claimed a mate, a wolfless human from nowhere. They've come to see the curiosity for themselves. To test the weakness in your armor. The warmth I'd felt last night curdled into cold dread. Test me. They will challenge you, Cashin said, his voice grim. Question your place, your worth. They'll probe, looking for any crack. A Luna must be a pillar of strength beside her alpha. They doubt a human can be that pillar. Maybe they're right, I whispered, the old fear rising like bile. They are not. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides, taking my hands. They were shockingly warm. You have survived more than any of their pampered, pure-blooded Lunas could imagine. You stood before your father without crumbling. That is strength they cannot comprehend. Strength of spirit isn't strength of fang, Selene pointed out, not unkindly but factually. Then today it will have to be. Cashin squeezed my fingers. I need you at the breakfast table, by my side. Let them see you are not afraid. But I am, I breathed, I am so afraid. Then let them see your courage, he said, his amber eyes holding mine, pouring his own formidable will into me. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Alara, it's moving forward despite it. Fake it, for me. The great hall was filled with a low, ominous hum. 3 distinct groups of wolves sat at the long tables, their leaders at the high table with Cashin's empty chair. I recognized the types from childhood stories. Alpha Bronson of the Stoneclaw pack, burly, bearded, with a face like weathered granite. Alpha Linnea of the Mistuad pack, elegant, sharp-featured, with watchful green eyes. And Alpha Victor of the Ironwood pack, older, with silver hair and a cold, calculating gaze that settled on me like a weight. All conversation died as we entered. Cashin led me to the high table, his hand a steady pressure on the small of my back. The visiting alphas rose, their eyes cataloging every detail of my simple dress, my human posture, my lack of any wolfish aura. Cashin, Alpha Bronson grumbled, his voice like rocks tumbling. We heard the rumors, had to see for ourselves. This is her. Alpha Victor didn't bother with greetings, his lip curled slightly. The human who would be Luna, I must confess I expected more. I felt Cashin's power swell, a silent warning rumble. I touched his arm lightly, a signal, let me. I met Victor's cold stare. What exactly were you expecting, Alpha Victor? Fur on the spot. A surprised chuckle came from Alpha Linnea, quickly stifled. Victor's eyes narrowed. I expected a wolf, he said flatly. A partner of equal power for the Storm Lord, not a sheltered girl with no scent, no bond, no connection to our world. What do you possibly bring to this union, to this pack? Every ear in the hall was bent toward us. The silence was suffocating. I could feel the doubt radiating from the Nightfang wolves, the curiosity from the visitors. This was the test. My throat was desert dry. You're correct, I said, and my voice didn't shake. It was a miracle. I bring no wolf, no ancient lineage, no political alliance. I took a small step forward, away from Cashin's protective shadow. I bring only myself, a lifetime of learning to survive in a world that sees me as prey, an understanding of the human world that borders all your territories. And a perspective that isn't clouded by centuries of the same traditions that allowed a child to be thrown away. Victor's face tightened. Sentimentality is not leadership. No, I agreed, but compassion is, and justice is. I'm not here seeking your approval, Alpha Victor. I'm here because Cashin asked me to be. If that's not enough for you, I let my gaze sweep over the other alphas, then that is your limitation, not mine. The hall was dead quiet. Alpha Linnea was watching me with intense, reassessing interest. Bronson looked vaguely impressed. Victor was furious. Pretty words, he sneered. But the old ways have tests for a reason, the Luna trials, or have you abandoned tradition entirely, Cashin? A collective intake of breath. Selene stiffened. Alistair's face went grave. The trials haven't been invoked in 50 years, Cashin said, his voice dangerously soft. Because we've had no need, Linnea interjected. But this is an unusual situation, Cashin. If you want her authority recognized, if you want to silence the whispers before they become roars, let her prove herself. By the old laws, let the moon decide. What are the Luna trials? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Alistair spoke, his voice heavy. 3 ancient challenges, child of body, mind, and spirit. They test a Luna's courage, her wisdom, and her bond with her inner wolf and the moon herself. They are grueling, designed for a fully shifted werewolf at the peak of her power. And you suggest she undertake them? Cashin's question was a growl. Without a wolf. It's not a test, it's a death sentence. Then perhaps she is not meant to be Luna, Victor said, spreading his hands, the picture of false regret. Anger, hot and clean, burned through my fear. They thought I was weak. They thought my humanity was a flaw. They were using the very traditions that had orphaned me to try and break me now. I'll do it. The words rang out clear and firm. Cashin whirled to look at me, shock and fear in his eyes. Ilara, no. I'll do the trials, I repeated, looking at Victor, at Linnea, at Bronson. If that is what it takes for you and for every wolf who doubts to see that I am not a mistake, then I will face them. You don't know what you're agreeing to, Selene hissed. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to, I said, and for the first time I felt a flicker of that different strength, the strength of having nothing left to lose. But I have a condition. Victor raised a brow. You're in no position to set terms, aren't I? I held his gaze. You want me to jump through your ancient hoops? Fine, but when I complete these trials, and I will complete them, all questions end. You will acknowledge me as Luna of Nightfang before all the gathered packs. You will swear fealty to Cashin's choice. And the law of casting out the Wolfless, you will begin talks to abolish it in your own territories. The audacity of my demand hung in the air. It was a political grenade. Victor looked apoplectic. Linnea's eyes gleamed. Bronson let out a low whistle. Cashin was staring at me with a look of such fierce, blazing pride it nearly knocked me over. You are remarkably bold, Alpha Linnea said slowly. 2 weeks, that gives you time to prepare, to train. 2 weeks, I agreed, my heart hammering against my ribs. And when I pass, the old world makes way for the new. I turned and walked out of the hall, my head high, my legs trembling. I didn't make it far. In a quiet alcove, my bravado evaporated and I sank against the wall, shaking. Cashin found me there. He didn't speak, he just pulled me into his arms, holding me as the tremors racked my body. Why? He murmured into my hair. Why would you agree to that? Because, I whispered, clinging to him, I'm tired of being their victim. I'm tired of being the question. I want to be the answer. I pulled back to look at him, tears in my eyes. But Cashin, I'm so scared. He rested his forehead against mine. I will be with you every step. The whole pack will train you. We will find a way. He kissed my brow, my brave, impossible mate. As he led me away, the ember inside me, that tiny presence of my sleeping wolf, didn't just glow. It flared, a spike of heat, of determination. And a single, silent word seemed to echo in the depths of my soul. Ready. The scratch on the other side of the door had become a purposeful scrape. The lock was about to break. And the world, both inside me and out, was holding its breath for what would come out. Chapter 7. The first ember. The 2 weeks that followed were a descent into a beautiful, brutal hell. My life became a rigid schedule of pain, study, and profound, aching doubt. Selene, despite her initial coldness, took charge of my physical training with the ruthless efficiency of a master strategist. She was my drill sergeant, my tormentor, and I began to suspect my first grudging ally. You move like prey, she snapped on the first morning as I stumbled through a basic defensive stance in a sun-dappled training clearing. All hesitation. Humans think, then act. Wolves know, then are. You must unlearn your humanity. I am human, I grunted, parrying her lightning-fast jab a second too late. Her wooden practice sword stung my ribs. You are more, she corrected, not unkindly. Or you will be. Stop thinking about the step. Feel the ground, feel the air shift. Your body knows, listen to it. It was agony, my muscles screamed, my lungs burned, but slowly, painfully, something shifted. I began to move on instinct, reacting to the subtle tension in Selene's shoulders before she struck, dodging on a breath of air. It wasn't my wolf. It was something older, primal human intuition, honed by survival and now sharpened by her relentless teaching. The mental training with Alistair was a different torture. History, genealogy, territorial treaties, ancient feuds that stretched back centuries. He taught me the delicate dance of pack diplomacy in his book-lined study, the scent of old paper and pipe smoke filling the air. A Luna is the heart of the pack, he explained, pointing to a complex map of territories, but she is also its chief diplomat. You must know whose grandfather insulted whose mother, which river border is disputed, which alpha's pride is more fragile than spring ice. Your words will carry the weight of Cashin's fist. Choose them with more care than any weapon. I spent nights memorizing names, alliances, slights. The politics were a labyrinth, but I found a strange clarity in them. It was a puzzle, and I had always been good with puzzles. The spiritual training was the hardest, for it confronted the hollow space directly. This was led by Anya, the pack's elder, a woman so old and wrinkled she seemed made of tree bark and moonlight. Her eyes, clouded with cataracts, saw everything. We sat in a quiet grove, a place thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. Your wolf is not gone, child, Anya said, her voice like wind through dry leaves. She placed a gnarled hand over my heart. She is hibernating, a deep, deep sleep. She went to sleep to save you. Save me? I asked, my throat tight. The pain of that night, Anya whispered, her blind eyes seeing a different scene. The rejection of a parent to a young wolf, that is a soul death. Her howl of grief would have shattered your mind, so she did the only thing she could. She wrapped herself in silence and dove deep, leaving you human enough to endure the unendurable. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. For the first time, my emptiness felt not like a curse, but a sacrifice. A profound act of love from a part of myself I'd never known. Will she ever wake up? I breathed. That is up to you, Anya said, squeezing my hand. Do you still want her, or have you made peace with the quiet? I thought of the lonely apartment, the careful echo of a life. I thought of the fierce joy on Cashin's face when he shifted, the sense of complete belonging I felt among the pack, even with their doubts. I wanted that wholeness. I wanted her. I want her, I said, the truth a sob. I want to be whole. Then call to her, Anya instructed. Not with your voice, with your heart. Every day, tell her she is safe. Tell her she is loved. Tell her she has a mate who sees her, even in the dark. So I did. In stolen moments between drills and studies, I would close my eyes and reach inward. At first, there was only the familiar void, then the faint ember of warmth. I focused on it, poured my longing, my hope, my newfound courage into that tiny glow. I'm here, we're safe now, you can come home. Sometimes there was nothing. Sometimes the warmth would pulse, soft and reassuring. And once in the deep of night, I heard it, not a word but a feeling. A sense of stretching, like something curled tight was slowly unfurling. Cashin was my anchor through it all. He trained with me, his presence a steady source of strength. He quizzed me on pack histories, pride shining in his eyes when I recited a complex lineage. And at night, he would simply hold me as I cried from exhaustion, his silence more comforting than any words. One evening, a week into the training, we walked along a high ridge overlooking the compound. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. They're watching you, you know, he said softly. The pack, they see how hard you're working. The doubt it's turning into something else, respect maybe, or at least curiosity. They see their alpha's stubbornness rubbing off on me, I said, managing a tired smile. He stopped walking, turning me to face him. They see you, Alara, your strength is quiet, but it's a tide. It pulls at them. You're going to pass these trials, not because of me, because of you. What if I fail? The fear was a constant companion. Then we face the consequences together, he said, his gaze unwavering. But you won't. He tucked a wind-blown strand of hair behind my ear, because I have seen your heart, and it is the strongest thing I have ever known. He leaned in, and for a breathtaking moment, I thought he would kiss me. He didn't. He rested his forehead against mine, our breath mingling, the connection between us a tangible, humming force. It was more intimate than any kiss could have been. The night before the trials, sleep was impossible. I paced my room, the lessons, the stances, the names swirling in a frantic storm. The warmth inside me was a steady, strong glow now, no longer an ember but a small, contained flame. I stopped by the window, clutching the sill, looking out at the full moon, huge and ominous and brilliant. I can't do this, I whispered to the night. I'm not enough. Yes, you are, the voice was clear, unmistakable, not in my ears but in the very center of my mind. Feminine, fierce, tired but awake, I spun but the room was empty. Who, me, the part of you that has been dreaming, I am done dreaming now. Tears of awe, not fear, spilled over. You're real. I have always been real, I was just waiting for you to be strong enough to call me back from the edge, and you are. The presence in my mind felt like a silken weight, a comforting pressure against my consciousness. Tomorrow we face them together. Can you come out? Can I shift? The longing was a physical ache. Not yet, she said, her mental voice gentle but firm. The bridge is still fragile. The change would break it and us, but soon. When you need me most, I will be there. I will lend you my sight, my speed, my heart. My name is Nisha. Nisha, it meant night in the old tongue. My wolf was named Night. I slid to the floor, hugging my knees, weeping with a joy so profound it was pain. I had a wolf, her name was Nisha, and she was coming home. The lock was broken, the door was open a crack. And from the other side, a brilliant, moonlit eye now peered back at me, full of ancient wisdom and a love as deep as my own. We were no longer alone, the echo had found its voice, and tomorrow we would howl. Chapter 8, Trial of the Body. The clearing was a natural amphitheater, ringed by ancient pines that stood like silent sentinels. The air was crisp, cold, charged with the energy of hundreds of gathered wolves. They stood in their packs, Nightfang a solid, anxious mass behind Cashin, Stoneclaw, Mistewad, and Ironwood forming distinct, watchful groups. The sky above was a flat, hard gray, the sun hidden. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I stood alone in the center, wearing simple, flexible clothes. Across from me, a mountain of a man from the Ironwood pack named Gregor cracked his knuckles. He was Alpha Victor's champion, a warrior known for his brutality. The first trial, physical combat, a test of Aluna's ability to defend her pack. Alpha Linnea stepped forward, her voice ringing clear in the stillness. The first trial tests strength, speed, and resilience. You may fight in human or wolf form, victory by submission or clear dominance. I took a steadying breath. I cannot shift. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Victor's smile was a thin, cruel slash. Then you will face Gregor in his wolf form, Linnea said, her green eyes holding a flicker of something that might have been pity. Do you understand the disadvantage? Nisha's presence warmed in my chest, a steady flame. We understand, let them underestimate. I understand, I said, my voice not faltering. Gregor didn't wait. He shifted in a blur of cracking bones and expanding muscle, becoming a massive, bristling wolf the color of dried blood. He was enormous, saliva dripping from fangs as long as my fingers. He let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in the pit of my stomach. He lunged. Seleni's training took over. I didn't think, I moved. I rolled to the side, the wind of his passing brushing my skin. He was fast, but I was smaller, nimbler. I remembered her lessons, use their size against them, be the darting fish, not the battling bull. I dodged, weaved, stayed just out of reach of his snapping jaws. I aimed blows at sensitive spots, a kick to the back of a knee joint, a strike to the nose. They were annoyances to him, nothing more. My human strength was a joke against his wolven bulk. He caught me with a glancing blow from one massive paw. Claws raked my arm, tearing through fabric and skin. White-hot pain exploded and blood welled, hot and slick. The crowd gasped. Now Nisha's voice was a calm command in the chaos. Let me in, don't fight me, flow with me. I stopped trying to control my fear, my movements. I opened the door in my mind, the one I'd just unlocked. Nisha didn't flood in, she merged. It wasn't a takeover, but a perfect, seamless blending. The world exploded into hyperclarity. Suddenly I could smell the pine sap on the wind, the individual sense of fear and excitement from the crowd, the musky, aggressive odor of Gregor's intent. I could hear the frantic beat of 100 hearts, the whisper of muscle coiling in Gregor's shoulders a split second before he moved. I could see the air currents, predict the path of his attack before he even knew it himself. My body moved with a grace and speed that wasn't human. I didn't dodge his next lunge, I flowed around it, a shadow attached to his motion. When he turned, snarling, I was already behind him. I didn't punch. I used the heel of my palm, driving it with Nisha's borrowed strength into a precise point at the base of his skull. Gregor staggered, a yelp of surprise and pain tearing from his throat. He whirled, enraged, and charged again, a battering ram of fur and fury. This time I didn't evade, I planted my feet. Nisha's power surged through my veins, a river of molten silver. As he leapt, jaws wide for my throat, I stepped into the attack. My hands came up not to block but to guide. I caught his massive head, using his own momentum and with a twist of my whole body, a move that should have been impossible. I used his weight to throw him. He crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact, the air whooshing from his lungs. Before he could recover, I was on him, my knee pressed to his ribcage, my hand locked around his throat, not squeezing but holding with an unbreakable, calm pressure. We were frozen there, a tableau of impossible victory. Me, a bleeding, wolfless human, pinning a fully shifted alpha warrior twice my size. The silence in the clearing was absolute, stunned. I looked into his furious, bewildered eyes. "Yield," I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every ear. He struggled for a moment, testing my grip. It was iron. He shifted back to human form beneath me, breathing heavily. He lowered his eyes, a gesture of profound submission. I yield. The silence shattered into a roar of sound, gasps, shouts, howls of disbelief. I stood up, releasing him, my limbs trembling now as Nisha's presence receded, leaving me drained and aching. The wound on my arm throbbed. Cashin was there in an instant, his face a mask of awe and fear. He didn't touch me, but his presence was a solid wall at my back. "By the moon," he breathed. Alpha Linnea stepped forward, her face pale with shock. "The first trial is past." I looked past her to Alpha Victor. His cold composure was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. He hadn't just seen a human win, he'd seen something else. He'd seen the ghost of a wolf in my eyes. As a healer rushed forward to tend my arm, the whispers swirled around me like leaves in a whirlwind. How impossible, she moved like one of us. Nisha's warmth pulsed inside me, a satisfied, tired hum. "We are more than one of us," she whispered. "We are something new." The first gate was breached, but as I glanced at Victor's hardening, calculating expression, I knew the true test was just beginning. The body had been proven. Now they would come for the mind and finally for the soul, and they would not underestimate me again. Chapter 9, Trial of the Mind. The healer's salve stung, but the wound on my arm closed with a speed that made her eyebrows climb. "Remarkable," she murmured, binding it with clean linen. It was Nisha's influence, her latent power already knitting me back together. I was given water and a brief rest in a quiet tent at the edge of the clearing. Cashin stayed outside, a silent, vigilant guardian. I could feel his worry like a physical pressure against the tent walls. An hour later, I was summoned back to the center. The crowd had grown even larger, word having spread of the impossible first victory. The air crackled with a new, intense curiosity. This was no longer a joke or a tragedy in the making. It was a spectacle, and I was the enigma at its heart. Alpha Bronson of Stoneclaw stood forward for the second trial. He was a bear of a man, but his eyes, deep set in his weathered face, held a shrewd intelligence. "The second trial," he announced, his voice a gravelly roll, "tests wisdom, judgment, and the heart of a leader. Aluna must settle disputes not with claw, but with clarity." He gestured, and two Nightfang Pack members were ushered forward, a burly, red-faced man named Torin and a slight, fierce-looking woman named Liana. They stood apart, glowering at each other. "These two," Bronson explained, "have a dispute over hunting rights in the Western Valley. The valley has been shared for generations, but a prized elk herd has shifted its migration. Torin's family claims first right by ancient lineage. Liana's family claims need, as their sector has been struck by blight. Both claims have merit, both have threatened to break pack peace over it." He looked at me. "You will hear their cases, you will propose a binding solution. We," he indicated the gathered alphas, "will judge its fairness, its wisdom, and its potential to heal the rift, not just settle the score." My mouth went dry. This wasn't about memorized history. This was about real lives, real anger. I could feel the tension between Torin and Liana, a bitter, seething thing. I saw Cashin watching intently, his face carefully neutral. This was a test of my ability to lead his people. "Speak your cases," I said, forcing my voice to be calm. Torin spoke first, his voice booming with indignation, citing carvings on stone, promises made a century ago. Liana followed, her voice sharp with desperation, describing sick children, empty larders, the unfairness of tradition in the face of starvation. I listened, truly listened. Not just to their words, but to the fear beneath them. Torin wasn't just defending a right, he was defending his family's legacy, his place in the pack's memory. Liana wasn't just asking for food, she was fighting for her family's survival, their dignity. Nisha was quiet within me, but her presence was a lens sharpening my perception. I could smell Torin's stubborn pride like old oak. I could taste Liana's frantic fear, sharp as wintergreen. This wasn't about elk, it was about belonging, about being seen. The solution Alistair's lessons would suggest was a compromise: split the herd, divide the season. It was logical. It was also a weak leader's choice, pleasing no one and sowing seeds for future resentment. I looked at Torin, then at Liana. The idea came not from a textbook but from the deep well of my own loneliness, my own understanding of what it meant to have nothing. The Western Valley herd, I began, and the clearing fell silent, will be hunted by Liana's family this season. Torin's face flushed crimson. A gasp went up. I raised a hand before he could erupt. Hear the rest. In return, Torin's family will have sole rights to the northern salmon run, which is richer this year than it has been in decades. Furthermore, I looked at both of them. Torin, your knowledge of the valley's terrain is unmatched. Liana, your family's skill in tracking is renowned. For this season, you will work together. Torin will guide Liana's hunters to the best grounds. In return, Liana's family will teach yours their method for smoking and preserving meat, a skill that will benefit your lineage for generations to come. I paused, letting the words hang. You do not split a prize and create two losers. You combine strengths and create a greater victory for the whole pack. Your families will share the bounty, and more importantly, you will share knowledge. You will no longer be rivals for a shrinking pie. You will be partners building a bigger one. The silence that followed was profound. Torin was staring at me, his anger replaced by stunned calculation. Liana's eyes were wide, filling with a wary, fragile hope. You would have us work together? Torin asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. I would have you be pack, I said simply, the way it's meant to be. I turned to the alphas. That is my judgment. Alpha Bronson rubbed his beard, looking between the two parties. Torin, Liana, do you accept this Luna's judgment? Will you abide by it? They looked at each other, not with friendship, but with a new, grudging respect. Slowly, Torin nodded. Liana dipped her head. We accept, they said in rough unison. Bronson turned to Linnea and Victor. They conferred in low tones. Finally, Linnea stepped forward. Her expression was unreadable. The solution is innovative. It addresses the immediate need, secures a valuable resource for both, and seeks to transform conflict into cooperation. It shows a deep understanding of pack as a living organism, not just a hierarchy. She met my eyes. The second trial is past. This time the reaction from the crowd was different. Not shock, but a low, thoughtful murmur. I saw nods among the Nightfang wolves. They were seeing me not as a human oddity, but as someone who could solve their problems, who understood the fabric of their lives. But as the crowd's energy shifted, I caught Victor's eye. The initial shock was gone, replaced by a cold, simmering fury. I hadn't just passed his test, I'd undermined his worldview. A wolfless human had shown more diplomatic wisdom than many seasoned alphas. His pride was a wounded beast, and wounded beasts are the most dangerous. 2 trials down, 1 to go, the spiritual test, the one that required a connection I had just begun to forge. As the crowd began to disperse for the final preparation, a deep, primal fear settled in my gut. They had tested my borrowed strength and my human mind. Now they would demand to see my soul. And if Nisha and I weren't perfectly aligned, if the door between us was still too fragile, the moon would find me empty and all this would be for nothing. The warmth inside me flickered, not with doubt but with a sudden, sharp trepidation. The true trial was coming. And it would be held in a courtroom with no walls, under a judge who had already once deemed me unworthy. Chapter 10. The Moon's Whisper. The final trial was to be held at moonrise in the most sacred part of the Nightfang territory, the Silent Grove. No spectators were allowed beyond the circle of alphas and the pack elders. The air grew colder as dusk bled into a deep velvet blue. Stars pricked the sky, faint at first then bold. They led me to the grove's heart. A perfect circle of silver birch trees, their bark glowing faintly in the gathering dark. The ground was covered in soft, white moss. At the center sat a flat, ancient stone etched with phases of the moon. The atmosphere was heavy with centuries of prayer and power. It hummed against my skin. Elder Anya, supported by 2 younger wolves, took her place by the stone. Cashin, Selene, Alistair, and the 3 visiting alphas formed an outer ring. No one spoke. The only sound was the sigh of the wind through the birch leaves. Anya's milky eyes found mine. The third trial is of spirit. It tests the connection to the moon, our mother and maker. It tests the truth of the bond between woman and wolf. Her voice was a dry rustle. For one who cannot shift, the path is untrodden. You must enter a trance, open your soul, and seek the moon's vision. If she acknowledges you, you will be shown a truth. If she finds you empty, you will see only the dark. How does one seek a vision? I asked, my voice small in the sacred space. You quiet the human mind, Anya said. You listen with the heart your wolf would have, you ask and you wait. I looked at Cashin. His face was etched with tension, but he gave me a single, slow nod. Trust yourself. I sat on the cold stone, crossing my legs. I closed my eyes. The silence of the grove was a living thing, pressing in on me. I tried to quiet my frantic thoughts, the pain in my arm, the memory of Gregor's growl, the feel of Torin and Liana's hope. It was useless. My mind was a storm. Nisha, I called inward desperately. Her presence glowed, warm and steady. I am here. Do not seek with your thoughts, seek with your longing, your loneliness, your hope. That is the language she understands. I let go of trying to be empty. Instead, I focused on the feeling of the thread between Cashin and me, that strong, golden tether of belonging. I focused on the new warmth in my chest, the miracle of Nisha. I focused on the bitter ache of the little girl abandoned in the dark, and the fierce, fragile courage of the woman trying to build a home. Please, I thought, pouring all of it into the silent night. Mother Moon, I have been so lost, I have been so empty. Do you see me? Am I yours? At first, nothing. Just the cold stone, the whispering trees, the weight of expectation. Then a sliver of silver light seemed to penetrate my closed eyelids, not from the sky, but from within the grove itself. The air grew warmer, sweeter, smelling of night-blooming jasmine and cold starlight. I opened my eyes. I was no longer in the grove. I stood on a vast, calm sea that reflected a sky drowned in stars. Above me, the moon hung, not a distant disk, but a colossal, luminous presence. It was so close I felt I could reach out and touch its cool, radiant surface. The light was gentle, but it illuminated everything, the depths of the water below, the infinite vault above, the very core of my being. A figure formed from the moonlight itself, stepping onto the water as if it were glass. She was both young and ancient, her features shifting like cloud shadows on the moon's face. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her eyes were twin full moons, filled with a love so vast and sorrowful it stole my breath. Daughter of silence. Her voice was not a sound, but a vibration in my soul. Child of the great rejection, you have walked a path of shadows no pup should ever tread. I fell to my knees on the water, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't speak. Do you blame the one who cast you out? The question was a spear of light probing the deepest, most festering wound. Yes, I sobbed, the truth torn from me. Every day I hate him for it. And yet you have not asked your mighty mate to burn his world to ash. Why? I looked up into those impossible eyes. Because more ash won't clean my wounds, it would just make the whole world dirty. I don't want his destruction. I want the pain to mean something. I want no other child to ever feel this cold. The moon's expression softened into something like a smile. Wisdom, true strength is not in the claw, but in the choice to sheath it. Your mother knew this. She saw the seed of this strength in you, even as she faded. My mother, a fresh wave of grief and longing crashed over me. A vision unfolded in the moonlight between us. A beautiful woman with kind eyes, my eyes, weak in a bed, holding a bundle, me. She was speaking to a younger, hard-faced Kaelin. Promise me, Kaelin, promise you will love her, wolf or no wolf, she is special. The moon has shown me her strength will be of a different kind, a kind that will change everything. I watched my father nod, tears in his own eyes, taking the bundle. I watched the light fade from my mother's face, the vision dissolved. He broke his promise. Fear made him small, but you have grown tall in the barren soil. You have cultivated compassion where you were shown none. The moon reached out a hand of shimmering light. As it touched my forehead, a crown of delicate, cool moonlight formed there, not a physical thing, but a weightless, glowing circlet of pure energy. I name you Luna of Nightfang. Not because you have a wolf, but because you have the heart of one. Not because you wield power, but because you understand its true purpose, to protect, to nurture, to guide. You are my daughter, Ilara, the light in the pack's darkness. The bridge between the old world and the new. Power, ancient and gentle and terrifying, flowed into me. It wasn't the fierce, borrowing strength of Nisha. It was a benediction, a claiming. It filled the last of the hollow spaces, sealing the bond between my human self and the sleeping wolf, making us truly one. Wake now, my child, and show them what the moon has chosen. The light became blinding. The sea, the sky, the luminous figure, all dissolved into a shower of silver sparks. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I was back on the stone in the silent grove, but everything was different. The world was etched in silver. I could see the life force in the ancient trees, a soft green glow. I could see the auras of the people around me, Cashin's a blazing, protective gold, Seleni's a sharp, focused blue, Victor's a murky, resentful red. And on my head, visible to every widened eye in the circle, rested the faint, shimmering outline of a lunar crown. It cast a soft, silver radiance on my face. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Elder Anya was the first to break the silence. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles on her cheek. "The moon has spoken," she whispered, her voice thick with awe. "She has claimed Alara as her daughter and blessed her. The third trial is not just past, it is transcended." Cashin sank to one knee, his head bowed. A soft, choked sound of overwhelming emotion escaped him. One by one, Selene, Alistair, the Nightfang elders, they all followed, bending the knee in the sacred grove. Alpha Linea's face was pale with reverence. She too knelt. Bronson, after a moment's hesitation, grunted and followed suit. Only Victor remained standing. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief. This is trickery, an illusion." "You felt it, Victor," Linnea said, her voice hard as she rose. "We all felt the mother's presence." "You would call her a trick, you would deny her will." Victor looked around, isolated in his defiance. He saw the crown on my head, saw the absolute conviction on the faces of those kneeling. He saw Cashin slowly rise, his amber eyes now fixed on him with a promise of violence should he utter one more word. With a strangled sound of rage, Alpha Victor of Ironwood slowly, stiffly, lowered himself to one knee. The submission was not to me, but to the undeniable power that had just anointed me. "I yield," he ground out, "to the moon's choice." In the shimmering silence, I rose from the stone. The crown of light slowly faded, but the feeling of it, the authority and the connection, remained etched into my soul. I had done it, not as a human pretending to be a wolf, not as a wolf using a human shell, but as something new, something chosen. I met Cashin's gaze across the grove. The love and pride there was a sun unto itself. He mouthed a single word, "Luna." The ghost was gone. In her place stood a queen, crowned not by man but by moonlight. And the night held its breath, waiting for her first command. Chapter 11. The coronation. The days following the trial in the silent grove passed in a surreal, sun-drenched haze. The atmosphere in Nightfang territory had transformed entirely. Where there had been skepticism and wary curiosity, there was now a buzzing, reverent awe. Wolves I didn't know would pause and bow their heads as I passed, their eyes wide. Children whispered and pointed, not in mockery but in wonder. The story of the moon's blessing had spread like wildfire, a sacred flame igniting the pack. Preparations for the official Luna ceremony began at once. The lodge was transformed with garlands of night-blooming flowers and swathes of silver and midnight blue fabric. The air smelled of baking bread, roasting meats, and fragrant herbs. It was a celebration of not just a union, but a divine appointment. I was kept busy, but in a pleasant, overwhelming way. Selene, her coldness completely thawed into a brisk, efficient respect, oversaw the creation of my ceremony dress, a gown of layered silvery gray silk that moved like moonlight on water, with subtle embroidery of wolves and crescent moons at the hem. Alistair drilled me on the ancient vows, his voice proud. Cashin was everywhere and nowhere, managing the influx of guests, alphas and dignitaries from a dozen allied packs now arriving to witness the historic coronation. His eyes would find me across a crowded room, and the thread between us would pull taut, humming with a joy so profound it felt like a physical ache. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and cold. I stood in the room that would soon be ours, the Alpha and Luna's chambers, as Selene and a few other pack women fussed with my hair, weaving strands of silver thread and tiny pearls through the dark waves. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, regal, calm, luminous, nervous. Selene asked, meeting my eyes in the glass. Terrified, I admitted, my hands trembling slightly. "I'm about to swear to guide and protect thousands of wolves. I can barely keep a houseplant alive." One of the younger women, Mara, giggled. Selene's lips quirked. "The plant didn't have the moon's personal endorsement. You'll be fine. The pack believes in you. More importantly, he believes in you. And," she added, her voice dropping, "so do I for what it's worth." Her words meant more than any vow. "Thank you, Selene." The ceremony was to be held at moonrise in the main clearing, the same place where I'd fought Gregor, but it was unrecognizable now. Torches lit a path to a central dais. Every member of Nightfang who could stand was there, joined by hundreds of visitors in their finest furs and silks. The air thrummed with anticipation. As the last sliver of sun vanished, Elder Anya, resplendent in white robes, took her place on the dais. Cashin stood beside her, dressed in ceremonial black leather and silver, looking every inch the Storm Lord, but his eyes held a softness only for me. A hush fell, it was time. I walked the torchlit path alone, the silvery dress whispering around my ankles. The eyes of the Wolf Nation were upon me, but I felt no fear. Nisha's presence was a warm, steady flame in my core, and Cashin's love was a beacon at the end of the path. I reached the dais and took Cashin's outstretched hand. His fingers closed around mine, strong and sure. Anya's voice, amplified by the stillness and her own power, rang out. We gather under the witness of the Mother Moon to bind two souls, to crown a heart, and to welcome a new light into the heart of Nightfang. She anointed our foreheads with sacred oil that smelled of cedar and snow. She bound our wrists together with a braided cord of silver and black. Then she turned to Cashin. Cashin Vale, Alpha of Nightfang, Storm Lord. Do you take Alara as your fated mate, your Luna, your equal in all things? Do you pledge to her your protection, your loyalty, your trust, and the strength of your arm? Do you swear to honor her wisdom as you would your own? Cashin's amber eyes burned into mine. I do. Before the moon, before this pack, before all gathered, I claim her as mine. My heart is hers, my strength is hers, my life is hers, from this night until the stars fall from the sky. A collective sigh moved through the crowd. Anya turned to me, my heart hammered against my ribs. Alara, daughter of the moon, blessed and chosen, do you take Cashin as your fated mate, your alpha, your equal? Do you pledge to him your loyalty, your counsel, your compassion, and the courage of your spirit? Do you swear to stand as Luna of Nightfang, to be the heart of this pack, the shelter for the weak, and the voice of justice? I looked at Cashin, at the pack, at the sea of hopeful faces. This was my choice, my home, my family. I do. My voice rang clear and strong. I accept this bond. I pledge myself to Cashin, to Nightfang, to every wolf who seeks a place to belong. I will lead with a compassionate heart. I will fight for what is right. I will love with everything I am, from this night until the mountains wear down to dust. Anya raised her arms to the sky, where the first stars were beginning to glitter. Then by the power of the moon, by the will of the pack, and by the bond of destined souls, I declare you mated, Alpha and Luna, bound for eternity. As she spoke the final words, the mate bond I had felt as a thread snapped into place as a completed, glorious circuit. Power, Cashin's fierce, protective dominance, and my own new, moon-blessed authority flowed between us in a dizzying, ecstatic rush. It was union, it was completion, it was home. The pack erupted, not in cheers but in a unified, triumphant howl that rose from hundreds of throats, human and wolf, shaking the very trees. It was a sound of acceptance, of joy, of a new beginning. Cashin didn't kiss me. He pulled me into a fierce, crushing embrace, his face buried in my hair. My Luna, he whispered, the words of vibration against my skin. My queen, my everything. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn. I was introduced to a dizzying array of alphas and their mates, all now treating me with deep respect. I danced with Cashin under the stars, I laughed with Selene and Alistair, I accepted the shy congratulations of pack children. In the quiet hour before sunrise, as the festivities wound down, a young, breathless scout approached Cashin and Selene, his face grim. They spoke in low, urgent tones. Cashin's expression darkened, his eyes flicking to me. He came to my side, taking my hand, a messenger from the border. His voice was tight. Your father, Alpha Kalen, has arrived. He requests formal permission to enter Nightfang territory. He says he must speak with you, that it is urgent, concerning your mother. The warmth of the celebration vanished, replaced by the old, familiar cold, my mother. The ghost between us, Cashin's jaw was clenched. You don't have to see him, I can send him away, tell him you refuse. I looked at our joined hands, at the silver binding cord still on my wrist. I was no longer the girl he'd abandoned. I was Luna of Nightfang, crowned by the moon herself. The past was a shadow, and I was standing in the light. No, I said, my voice steady. Let him come, bring him to the lodge at noon. I will hear what he has to say. Cashin searched my face, then nodded, pride and concern warring in his eyes. I will be with you. As he went to give the orders, I turned and walked back toward the lodge, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in pale gold and rose. The night of my coronation was over. The morning of my first true test as Luna was about to begin. The past was knocking at my door, and I was no longer afraid to answer. Chapter 12. The penitent King Noon arrived with a hard, clear light. The great hall of the lodge felt different now, no longer a site of judgment, but a throne room. Cashin sat in the Alpha's chair, a carved monolith of dark wood. I sat beside him in a new, smaller chair that had been crafted overnight. Selene and Alistair stood flanking us like sentinels. The air was formal, icy. The doors opened. Alpha Kalen entered, escorted by 2 Nightfang guards. He looked older in the harsh daylight, diminished. The arrogant Alpha who had cast me out was gone, replaced by a man weighed down by a burden he could no longer carry. His eyes went straight to me, taking in the Luna's circlet now resting on my brow, a physical band of silver to replace the vanished crown of light. He flinched as if struck. He stopped a respectful distance away and bowed, not just to Cashin, but deeply to me. Alpha Vale. Luna Alara, the title on his lips sounded strange, painful. You requested an audience, Cashin said, his voice devoid of warmth. State your purpose. Kalen's gaze remained on me. I have come to return what is yours and to beg for a hearing. From inside his coat he withdrew not a weapon but a bundle of aged, cracked leather, a book. He held it out with trembling hands. Your mother's journal. She kept it from her first shift until the end. I could not bear to read it after she was gone. I locked it away. I only opened it after I saw you at the festival. My breath hitched, my mother's voice, her thoughts, a piece of her I never dreamed I'd have. I nodded to Alistair, who stepped forward, took the journal and brought it to me. The leather was soft, worn. I placed my hand on it and a jolt of connection, of love, shot through my fingers. Why now? I asked, my voice cooler than I felt. Because her words forced me to see the truth, he said, his own voice breaking. Your mother, Celeste, she was the best of us. Fierce, wise, gentle. When she died bringing you into the world, a part of me died with her, and I blamed the only living reminder of my loss, you. He took a shaky step forward, the guards tensing, but Cashin waved them down. When you didn't shift, it felt like a final curse, like the moon was denying me even her memory. The law, the tradition, it was a convenient excuse to make the pain in my chest go away, to exile my own failure. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with a grief so raw it was hard to witness. I was wrong about everything. He swallowed hard. Her journal, she knew, Alara. She had visions, dreams from the moon. She wrote that your wolf would be special, different, that she would sleep until you were strong enough to hold her power. That you would face a great darkness, a rejection, but that it would forge you into something that would change our world. A tear traced a path through his weathered cheek. Her last words to me were a plea. Love her, Kalen, wolf or no wolf. She is our future, I promised her, and then I broke that promise to a dying woman. I have carried that shame for 18 years. The hall was utterly silent. I clutched the journal to my chest, feeling the truth of his words resonate in the very paper. I cannot give you back your childhood, he whispered, his shoulders slumping. I cannot erase the scars, but I can give you her love, her faith in you, and I can offer the only thing I have left. He sank slowly, painfully, to both knees on the stone floor. An Alpha kneeling, my apology, my remorse, and my submission. He bowed his head, exposing the back of his neck, the ultimate sign of surrender in wolf culture. I submit to the authority of Luna Alara of Nightfang. I relinquish any claim as your father. I am at your mercy. The shock in the room was palpable. Selene's eyes were wide. Alistair looked solemn. Cashin watched me, his expression unreadable, giving me this moment. I looked at the broken man on the floor, the ghost of my tormentor. The anger was still there, a cold, hard stone. But beneath it I felt a trickle of something else, pity, and the first faint echo of forgiveness, not for him but for myself. Rise, Alpha Kalen, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet hall. He looked up, confusion and hope warring in his eyes. I accept your apology, I continued, choosing each word with the care Alistair had taught me. And I will treasure my mother's words, but forgiveness, that is a path, not a destination. It may take years, it may never come. You do not get to arrive with explanations and have the past wiped clean. He nodded, the hope dimming but not dying. I understand. However, I said, standing up, I walked down from the dais until I stood before him. I was not a child looking up. We were eye to eye. You are welcome at Nightfang for ceremonies and gatherings. You may attempt to build a new relationship with me, but it will be on my terms, with respect for my authority, my mate, and my pack. I let my Luna's power, the moon-blessed authority, seep into my voice. In this territory, you answer to me, do you understand? He held my gaze, and I saw the moment he truly saw me, not as his failed daughter, but as a queen. The last of his resistance crumbled. I understand, Luna, I submit to your will. Then rise, I said, and know that your presence here is a privilege granted by my grace. Betray that grace, and you will never cross our borders again. He stood, his posture that of a subordinate, not a peer. Thank you, he said, the words thick, for hearing me, for the chance. After he was escorted out, the hall seemed to exhale. Cashin came to my side, his hand finding the small of my back. "You handled that with more strength and mercy than he deserved," he murmured. "Mercy isn't for the deserving," I said softly, still clutching the journal. "It's for the one who gives it. It sets me free, not him." That night, alone in our chambers, I finally opened my mother's journal. Her handwriting was bold and graceful. I read her hopes, her fears, her fierce love for my father, her awe at the life growing inside her. And then the later entries, the dreams. "The moon shows me a daughter with eyes like winter sky. Her wolf is not a companion but a sleeper, a guardian of a deep, quiet power. She will be tested in fire and ice. She will be abandoned by the very ones who should cherish her. But from that desolation she will rise, not as a destroyer but as a healer, a unifier. She will be Luna not just of a pack but of a new hope." I read until the candles burned low, tears streaming down my face. She had seen me. She had believed in me. Her love had spanned death and time to find me here now. As I finally closed the book, Nisha's presence swelled within me, warm and full of a sorrowful joy. "She never left us," she whispered. "Her love was the first thread. Cashin's is the second, and the pack S is weaving the tapestry around us now." I fell asleep with the journal on my chest, my mother's words a balm on the oldest wound. The past was not forgiven, but it was finally, peacefully laid to rest. The future was mine to shape, and for the first time I embraced the weight of that crown with a whole heart scarred but unbroken. The penance had been given, the healing could finally begin. Chapter 13, The Howl in the Night. The weeks after my father's submission settled into a new, profound rhythm. I was no longer a guest or a candidate, but Luna in truth. I attended council meetings, my voice growing steadier. I mediated smaller disputes, finding that the wisdom I'd used in the trial came more naturally now. The pack's respect solidified into genuine affection. Children brought me wildflowers, elders sought my counsel, and within me Nisha grew. Her presence was a constant, warm companion. I could feel her emotions, curiosity when I explored new parts of the territory, a protective surge when Cashin was near, a playful joy when we ran through the forests together, though I was still on two legs. The door between us was wide open now, but we existed in a peaceful, shared space. The shift, however, remained elusive, a barrier of fragile glass we dared not break. Then the visions started. At first they were just flashes when I closed my eyes, a dark wolf with eyes like smoldering coals running through burned forests, the scent of fear and rotten magic, a howl that wasn't a song but a scream of rage. I told Cashin, his face grew grim. "Rogues have been stirring at the edges of the northern territories, wolves cast out or born without packs, but this sounds organized and hateful. He's gathering them," I said, the certainty cold in my gut. "The dark wolf, he's angry and he's using their pain as a weapon." News confirmed it a few days later. A scout from the neighboring Mastuad pack arrived, wounded and exhausted. "They call him Vex," the scout panted as our healers tended him. "No one knows his original pack. He's rallying the outcasts, the Wolfless, the banished. He's telling them the packs are a sickness, that purity is a lie used to control them, and he's promising them a new world, one carved from the ashes of the old." The scout's eyes found me, wide with a strange mix of fear and awe. "He knows about you, Luna. He says you're proof that the so-called pure alphas are hypocrites, that you're a symbol of the broken system trying to pretend it can be fixed. He says you're a pet, a token, and he's coming to shatter the illusion." A cold dread, deeper than any I'd felt before, settled in my bones. This wasn't just a challenge to territory. It was a challenge to everything I represented, to the fragile new hope I was trying to build. An emergency council was called. Alphas Linnea and Bronson arrived via swift runners, their faces tense. Victor notably did not come. "He's moving toward the neutral grounds north of Stoneclaw," Bronson reported, pointing at a map. "He has maybe 200 followers, and they're not just desperate, they're angry. They fight like they have nothing left to lose. We must crush them," Selene said, her voice hard. "A unified force from our three packs, wipe them out before their poison spreads." Crush them. I found myself speaking before I could stop. All eyes turned to me. "They're victims, Selene. They're what I could have become if Aunt Clara hadn't shown me kindness, if Cashin hadn't seen something else. They're in pain. Crushing pain just creates more of it." "So what would you have us do, Luna?" Linnea asked, not challenging but genuinely curious. "Offer them tea and sympathy while they burn our homes. We offer them what Vex cannot," I said, standing, my conviction crystallizing as I spoke. "A real alternative. He offers them revenge, which is just another cage. We offer them a home." We offer them the reform I pledged to bring. We show them that the world can change without being destroyed. Cashin was watching me, his eyes blazing with that fierce pride. You would have us meet an army with an invitation. I would have us meet despair with hope, I corrected. Let me speak to them. The reaction was instantaneous. Outrage from Selene, concern from Alistair, shock from Bronson. Absolutely not, Cashin said, the alpha's command in his voice for the first time directed at me. It's too dangerous. Vex wants you, you'd be walking into a trap. He wants the idea of me, I argued. The helpless symbol, let me show him and every wolf following him that I am not an idea, I am real, and the future I represent is real too. I walked around the table to stand before him. Cashin, you told me my strength was a different kind. Let me use it. Let me try to end this without a single life being lost on either side. The silence stretched. The thread between us hummed with his fear, my determination. If she goes, Linnea said slowly, we go with her. A full show of allied force at her back, not to attack but to protect, to show our unity, and to show that her words carry our collective might. After a long, agonizing minute, Cashin closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of a terrified love. You will have a full guard, you will not go past the front line, and at the first sign of attack, we pull back, promise me. I promise, I said. 2 days later, we stood at the edge of a wide, wind-scoured valley. Before us, on the opposite rise, was Vex's ragged army. They were a heartbreaking sight, wolves in thin, worn human forms, others in scrawny, mangy wolf shapes, but their eyes were not desperate. They were burning with a hard, fanatical light. At their head stood a man in patched leathers. Vex. He was tall, gaunt, with hair the color of ash and those terrible, burning coal eyes. His power was a jagged, sickly thing, all sharp edges and hate. Our forces, Nightfang, Mistuad, Stoneclaw, were a disciplined, gleaming wall of strength behind me. Cashin stood at my immediate right, a contained storm, Selene at my left. I stepped forward alone into the empty space between the armies. The wind whipped my hair and my silver-gray cloak. Vex. I called, my voice carrying on the cold air. I am Alara, Luna of Nightfang. I have come to talk. He let out a harsh, barking laugh. The pet comes to bark her master's words. Do you have a treat for the good outcasts, little Luna? A scrap from the Alpha's table. I have no treats, I said, walking a few steps closer. I could feel Cashin's tension like a wire pulled taut behind me. I was 6 years old when I was thrown from my pack for being wolfless. I was told I was nothing. I know the taste of that scrap, its ash. That gave him pause. Some of the wolves behind him shifted, listening. So you know, Vex sneered, and yet you curl at the feet of the ones who made the rules. You are their pretty lie to make themselves feel better about their cruelty. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. I am their reckoning. Because of me, Nightfang has changed its laws. Because of me, 2 other alphas are ready to do the same. The world that cast you out is already dying, Vex, but what you're building here, it's not a new world, it's just a mirror of the old one, painted in blood instead of tradition. You're offering them a different kind of cage. I offer them freedom, he roared. The freedom of the wild, the freedom of vengeance. Vengeance is a chain, I shouted back, pouring all my conviction into the words. It ties you forever to the people who hurt you. Is that what you want for them? I swept my arm toward his followers. To be forever defined by their pain, I am offering them a home, a place where what they are doesn't determine their worth, a chance to heal, not just to hurt. I saw it then, the flicker in the eyes of a young woman near the front, the doubt in a scarred man's face. They were listening. Vex saw it too, his fury exploded. Lies, she weakens you with pretty dreams, she is the disease pretending to be the cure. He shifted in a violent blur of dark fur and malice, becoming a massive, emaciated wolf with those same hellfire eyes. I will tear the lie from its throat. He launched himself at me. Elara, Cashin's roar shook the valley, but I didn't move. I stood my ground, and in that split second I didn't reach for Cashin or for my guards. I reached in. Nisha, now, please, I need you, not just your strength, I need us. The glass barrier shattered. The shift was not pain, it was explosion, it was ecstasy. It was coming home. Bones realigned, muscles transformed, senses blossomed into a glorious, overwhelming symphony. In the space of a heartbeat, where a woman had stood was a wolf, but not just any wolf. My fur was the silver white of moonlight on snow, exactly as I'd seen her in my mind. My eyes, I knew, now glowed with the same pale, luminous light. I was slender but powerful, radiating the calm, ancient authority of the blessing I carried. Vex was mid-leap, his jaws aimed for where my human throat had been. I moved. It was effortless. I flowed under his attack and met him not with tooth and claw but with my shoulder, slamming into his side with the full, moon-blessed force of my new form. He yelped, tumbling to the ground, scrambling up in shock. He stared at me, at the luminous wolf I had become, the living embodiment of everything he said was a lie. I lifted my head to the cold sky and I howled. It was not a sound of challenge, but of pure, undeniable truth. It was a song of belonging, of pain transformed, of a future that was possible. It echoed across the valley, clear and beautiful and strong, and from behind me Cashin's deep, majestic howl answered, then Seleni's, then Alistair's. Then the howls of 500 allied wolves rose in a chorus of unity, not of war but of welcome. The sound broke Vex's army. The young woman at the front dropped to her knees, weeping. The scarred man took a step toward our lines. One by one, then in groups, Vex's followers broke ranks, walking slowly, hesitantly, across the valley toward the sound of the howl that promised a home, not a grave. Vex stood alone before me, his hate crumbling into desolate confusion. He was a king of nothing. I shifted back to human form, the change smooth as silk. I stood before him whole. The choice remains, Vex. You can lead them into death, or you can follow them into something new, but the war you wanted is over. He looked at his deserted rise, at the wolves now being welcomed into the allied lines with blankets and food, not weapons. The fire in his eyes guttered and died. He turned without a word and limped away, a lone, dark figure swallowed by the wilderness. I turned to face Cashin. He was already running toward me. He didn't stop until he caught me up in his arms, spinning me around, his face buried in my neck. "You shifted," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. You're so beautiful." Around us, the valley was no longer a battlefield, but a place of gathering, the first step of a long healing. I had faced the darkness not with a claw, but with my truth, and my truth had a howl that could change the world. The Luna was no longer just a title. It was a living, breathing, silver-white promise under the vast, watching sky. Chapter 14, The Heart of the Pack. The return to Nightfang was not a march but a pilgrimage. We brought over 150 new souls with us, the former followers of Vex. They walked in a dazed silence, wrapped in borrowed cloaks, their eyes wide with a hope so fragile it seemed it might shatter in the wind. The pack, to its eternal credit, rose to the moment. Homes were opened, meals were shared, healers tended to wounds both physical and deep-seated. The integration was not seamless. There were wary glances, old prejudices simmering beneath the surface. But the sight of their Luna, once wolfless and now a living legend, walking among them, speaking to each newcomer by name, remembering their stories, it acted as a balm. I was their proof. If the moon could bless me, then no one was beyond redemption, beyond a place to belong. In the weeks that followed, my days found a new, deeper purpose. Mornings were spent with Cashin and the council, managing the practicalities of a suddenly larger pack, housing, resources, roles for the new members. Afternoons, I walked the territory, visiting the new settlement areas, listening. I heard stories of brutal rejections, of loneliness that echoed my own, of talent squandered because they didn't fit the old mold. A woman named Tessa had an incredible gift for healing herbs but had been cast out for being unable to shift. A man, Jonah, could track game by the faintest whisper of scent on the air, a skill now put to use for the pack's hunters. Nisha and I were one now. The shift was as natural as breathing. We ran together under the moon, a silver streak through the dark trees, our joy a shared song. My senses, even in human form, were preternaturally sharp. I could feel the emotional weather of the pack, pockets of anxiety, blooms of contentment, the steady, strong heartbeat of Cashin's love at the center of it all. One evening I found him in his study, staring at a map, a deep line of worry between his brows. "What is it?" I asked, coming to stand behind him, my hands on his shoulders. "Victor," he said, the name a growl. "Ironwood has closed its borders. He's recalled all his ambassadors. He's calling what happened in the valley a dangerous precedent. He says we've welcomed chaos into our hearts and weakened the pure blood of all packs." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Victor's pride had festered into something darker. He's isolating himself, building walls. "He's building a coalition of the fearful," Cashin corrected, turning to pull me into his lap. "A few smaller, traditionalist packs are listening. He's painting you not as a reformer but as a revolutionary, a threat to the natural order." I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "The old order let children die in the snow, Cashin. If that's what he wants to preserve, then let him build his walls." We'll build bridges so wide his walls will look like lonely pebbles in a river. He chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. When did you become so wise, my love? I had an excellent teacher, I murmured, and a very persistent wolf. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, a wave of dizziness hit me. The room tilted. I swayed, grabbing the bedpost. Cashin was at my side in an instant. Elara, what's wrong? Nothing, just lightheaded. It's been a long day. But it happened again the next morning. And a strange, new sensitivity to smells had me recoiling from the usually comforting scent of the breakfast meats. A deep, instinctual knowing, older than thought, blossomed in the space I shared with Nisha. Cashin watched me, his alpha senses picking up on the subtle changes in my scent, my heartbeat. His eyes widened slowly, comprehension dawning with a shock that softened into awe. Elara, I placed a hand on my still flat stomach. The truth was a sunrise inside me, warm and inevitable. Nisha's presence swelled with a fierce protective joy. Yes, I whispered, tears of pure, undiluted happiness welling in my eyes. I think I know so. The news, when we shared it with the pack that evening, ignited a celebration that dwarfed even the Luna ceremony. It was a riot of pure, unfettered joy. This was not just an heir, it was the future made flesh, a child born of a bond that had shattered tradition, blessed by the moon, a symbol of the new world we were building. But in the midst of the feasting and howling, I slipped away to a quiet balcony. The reality settled upon me, immense and wonderful and terrifying. I was going to be a mother. This child would never know the cold I had known. They would be surrounded by love, by pack, by a legacy of change. Cashin found me there, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his large hands splayed over my stomach. Are you all right? He murmured into my hair. I'm perfect, I said, leaning back into him. I was just thinking our child, wolf or not, alpha or beta or omega, it won't matter. They will be loved. They will belong. That's the world we're making, isn't it? That's the world you're making, my Luna, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm just the fortunate soul who gets to stand beside you while you build it. As the seasons turned, my body changed. The pack's care was a tangible thing, the best cuts of meat brought to my door, elders sharing stories of their own pregnancies, children leaving carefully picked wildflowers on our step. The newcomers, especially, watched my growing belly with a kind of reverent hope. I was a promise to them, too. A promise that the future had a place for their own children. The peace, however, was not universal. Scouts reported increased patrols along the Ironwood border, hostile whispers on the wind. Victor's fear was hardening into a threat. He saw our joy, our growing strength, our unborn child as an existential challenge. One crisp autumn day, a formal, sealed message arrived by Hawk. Cashin read it, his expression turning to granite. He handed it to me. The script was elegant, the words venomous. It was from Alpha Victor. It condemned our mongrel pack, called our coming child a blight on pure lineage, and formally severed all alliances. The final line was a threat dressed as prophecy. The moon may bless an aberration, but the natural world has its own ways of correcting mistakes. Winter is coming, Storm Lord. See that your delicate new growth does not perish in the frost. I crumpled the parchment in my fist, a fire lighting in my veins that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Nisha rose within me, not in fear, but in a quiet, deadly rage. They had threatened our child. I looked at Cashin and I saw the Storm Lord fully awakened in his eyes, not with reckless fury, but with a cold, terrifying certainty. He has made it personal, Cashin said, his voice like grinding stones. Yes, I agreed, my own voice steady. The girl who had run from shadows was gone. In her place was a Luna, a mother, a queen, and he has made his final mistake. He thinks Winter is his ally. I placed my hand over my heart, over the life growing within, but he forgets. The deepest frost only makes the returning spring sweeter, and we are the dawn. The challenge was thrown, the lines were drawn. But as I stood there, my mate's strength at my back, my pack's love surrounding me, and my child's future beating in time with my own, I felt no dread. Only a profound, unshakable calm. The battle for the soul of the wolf world had begun. And I would fight it not with the claws of the past, but with the fierce, gentle, unbreakable heart of the future. Our future. Chapter 15, the dawn we howled into being winter did come. It swept down from the mountains in a fury of howling wind and driving snow, wrapping Nightfang territory in a blanket of deepest white. But inside the lodge, inside the pack, there was a fire that no frost could touch. It was the fire of preparation, of unity, of fierce, quiet anticipation. my pregnancy progressed, a steady, miraculous swell of life beneath the furs and silks of my Luna's robes. Nisha's presence was a constant, vigilant warmth, intertwined with the new, fluttering consciousness of our child. I could feel them both, the ancient wolf and the new soul, a perfect, protected trinity within me. Victor, threats became actions. Ironwood wolves were caught sabotaging a remote Nightfang outpost. Hostile scouts lurked at our borders. The traditionalist packs who had heeded his call, the Blackridge and the Frostmane, amplified the hostile rhetoric. The wolf world was splitting, a continent dividing along a fissure of fear versus hope. Cashin and I, with Selene and Alistair, planned not for a war of annihilation but for a war of ideals. We would defend our borders with unwavering strength, yes. But our true weapon would be our example. We opened our doors wider. We sent envoys not just to allies but to the neutral packs, carrying stories of the newcomers thriving among us, of the healed rifts, of the prosperous, peaceful winter we were enjoying despite the external threats. The message was clear: the old way brings isolation and strife, the new way brings community and strength. The final confrontation, when it came, was not on some distant battlefield, it was at our very gates. It was the longest night of the year, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. The sentry horns sounded, a low, urgent moan that shook the ice from the trees. Victor had come, not with a rogue rabble but with the combined, disciplined forces of Ironwood, Blackridge, and Frostmane. They stood in a silent, grim line at the edge of the tree line, just beyond the sacred boundary of Nightfang. A declaration. Cashin, Selene, and our warriors formed a line facing them. I stood beside Cashin, not hidden away but visible to all. My silver-white fur cloak was thrown over my shoulders, my Luna's circlet firm on my brow, my hands resting on the curve of my stomach. I was the picture of everything they feared and despised: a ruling Luna, a wolfless born, a mother carrying the future they wanted to erase. Victor stepped forward, clad in war leathers. Cashin, his voice boomed across the frozen field. This ends now. Send out the human and her mongrel followers. Dissolve this experiment. Return to the true way, and this bloodshed need not happen. Cashin didn't shout. His voice, when it came, was a calm, carrying wave of absolute authority. There is only one truth here, Victor. You stand outside my home, threatening my mate, my child, and my pack. You are not a defender of tradition. You are a trespasser. Leave now. Victor's face contorted with rage. He raised a hand, ready to signal the attack. I stepped forward, just one step, onto the pristine snow between the lines. The movement, so simple, so pregnant with meaning, froze the scene. Alpha Victor, I called, my voice clear as ice crystal. You speak of blood, but look at your wolves. I swept my gaze across his battle line. Do they fight for a cause they believe in, or for the fear in your heart? You offer them a war to preserve a world that left them cold and hungry as children. I offer them peace. I offer their children a future where they will never know the shunning you and my father perfected. I saw it again, the flicker, the doubt. In a young Blackridge soldier's eyes, in the set of a Frostmane archer's jaw, she weaves spells with words. Victor snarled, spinning to address his own troops. Do not listen, listen to your own hearts. I cried, pouring every ounce of my conviction, my Luna's power, into the words. The moon-blessed authority resonated in the air, a palpable force. You were born to be protectors, providers, not instruments of an old alpha's grudge. The war you are about to fight is not for your families or your future. It is for his past. Lay down your arms, cross this line, and be welcome, not as conquerors but as brothers and sisters. Come home. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. The tension was a wire about to snap. Then from the ironwood line, a shield clattered to the snow. A young woman, her face pale but determined, stepped out of rank. She walked, slowly at first, then with more purpose, across the no-man's land toward our line. A Nightfang warrior moved to greet her, not with a weapon but with an outstretched hand. It was the crack in the dam. Another soldier followed, then a small group from Blackridge, then a trickle becoming a stream. Victor roared, commanding them to stop, but his voice was lost in the tide of their silent, desperate choice for hope over hatred. His coalition disintegrated before his eyes. In minutes, he stood with only his most fanatical inner circle, perhaps 50 wolves against the united front of Nightfang and the dozens of his own who had just abandoned him. His face was a mask of utter, devastated defeat. He had not been defeated by claw or fang but by a better idea, by the future he could not comprehend. This is not over, he whispered, the sound carrying in the sudden quiet. It is, Cashin said, finality ringing in the word. You are banished, Victor. From all allied territories. Your pack will be placed under the stewardship of a new alpha, chosen by them, who understands that true strength builds up rather than tears down. Take your loyal few and go. If you are seen near any pack land again, you will be treated as the rogue you have chosen to become. Victor looked at me one last time, and in his eyes I saw not just hatred, but the dawning horror of his own irrelevance. Without a word, he turned and vanished into the winter forest, his few followers slinking after him. The war was over before a single blow was struck. The cheer that rose from our pack and from the wolves who had crossed over was a sound of pure, sun-breaking through clouds triumph. Spring came early that year. The thaw was swift, the streams running high and merry with meltwater, and on a morning smelling of wet earth and blooming crocus in the same sunlit room where I had first felt Nisha stir, I brought new life into the world, a daughter. With a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they opened, were the exact, stunning blend of Cashin's amber and my own storm gray. She was perfect, whole, and she was ours. We named her Lyra for the constellation of the harp, a symbol of harmony, of music born from tension. Her birth was a celebration for the entire, now united territory. The packs that had once stood against us now sent gifts and blessings. The newcomers, fully integrated now, saw in her the living proof of the safety they had found. A month after Lyra's birth, on a night of a full, benevolent moon, we gathered the entire pack in the main clearing, not for a trial or a war, but for a promise. Cashin stood before them, Lyra cradled in one arm, his other around me. "The old wars are ended," he announced, his voice full of a deep, hard-won peace. "The new world is here. It is not a perfect world. It will require work and patience and great compassion. But it is a world where no child will be left in the cold because of what they are or are not. This," he looked down at Lyra, then at me, his love so bright it was its own light source, "is the world my Luna built. And it is our sacred duty, all of us, to protect it." He handed Lyra gently to me. I held my daughter, this tiny, breathing miracle, and looked out at the sea of faces: fierce Selene, wise Alistair, Tessa the healer, Jonah the tracker, the young soldier who had been the first to drop her shield. All of them my pack, my family. I lifted my head to the moon, my daughter in my arms, my mate at my side, my wolf singing softly in my soul, and I howled. It was a howl of gratitude, of triumph, of a love so vast it had rewritten destiny. From Cashin's throat rose the answering call, deep and sure, then Selene's, sharp and loyal, then Alistair's, steady and kind, and then one by one every wolf in Nightfang, those born to it and those who had chosen it, added their voice to the chorus. The sound swelled, a magnificent, harmonious symphony that filled the night, a declaration to the stars themselves. The abandoned, wolfless girl was gone, the uncertain mate was gone. In their place stood Alara, Luna of Nightfang, mother, queen, reformer. The echo of my beginning had finally, joyfully found its answer. Not in silence, but in the most beautiful, united howl the world had ever heard. We had faced the winter, and we had howled the dawn into being, and together, under the gentle eye of the moon, we would welcome it. Like, subscribe and comment for part 2.